we are off and running on a Friday morning here on the Women's Basketball Rundown. I am Kadarius Washington, and it is a pleasure to have you in as we talk about everything going on as far as the world of women's basketball is concerned. Day 2 of the Power 4 Conference Championships in the books. We are on to Day 3 now. So let's get you going here. We'll start with the big game of yesterday morning, Vanderbilt and Tennessee. And Vanderbilt took down Tennessee's 84-76. And this was pretty much a game of runs here. Vanderbilt started the game on a 17-5 run. Then Tennessee responded with a 12-2 run. Then in the third quarter, Vanderbilt went on a 13-0 run. And then the fourth, Vandy led by as much as 21 in the game, 72-51, and then Tennessee went on an 8-0 run in the middle of the fourth quarter, and then after the game was 79-64 Vanderbilt. Tennessee made things interesting with another 8-0 run until Michaela Blakes, Camille Peer, and Leilani Kapanis iced the game with free throws. Now let's take a closer look at things here on the Vanderbilt side. So Michaela Blakes, their star of the season, the reigning SEC Freshman of the Year, was off to a slow start in this one. She only had 5 points in the first half, and she didn't shoot the ball all that great. I think she had a streak where she had like 10 straight missed shots, 0 for 10, after making her first 3 or something like that. And then in the second half, she definitely responded. She had 19 points, with making 24 overall in the game. Ayanna Moore was by far their best offensive player in that game, had 23 points and shot 8 for 11 from the field. And Camille Peer, who was already entering this game with a chip on her shoulder after being snubbed honors of being of an all-SEC team, she responded with a double-double, 16 points and 15 rebounds, and defeated Tennessee twice in a season for the very first time in program history, and they will get the number 1 seed in the SEC, South Carolina, later today at noon, and that game will be on ESPN. Now let's take a closer look at Tennessee. So basically, Tennessee pretty much was just outclassed, outplayed, and outcoached. Now, I've been outspoken on how much I love Kim Caldwell, but she has made some very questionable coaching decisions. I mean, she made some questionable coaching decisions in the Texas A&M game with all of those substitutions. Yeah, it was fun at first, but, I mean, we're losing games here. So, I mean, what's going on? And the defense pretty much made it a game. I mean, with all of those steals, I mean, Talasia Cooper having those 4 steals and then getting a couple of blocks from some of the other players. But I really believe this game was much closer than it really should have. And then, I mean, from the defensive standpoint anyway, but nevertheless, it's the end of the line for Tennessee as far as the SEC tournament is concerned, and their hopes of hosting tournament games has pretty much gone up in smoke because they needed to win this one, and they probably would have needed to win today if they were playing today against South Carolina, which is a tough task, especially for Vanderbilt. But now they're projected to be a 5 seed. And another thing about it, I think we need to go ahead and put Tennessee on fraud watch, because I tweeted this out on my Twitter at CW Talk Sports, at CWTALKS Sports. Like, Tennessee, yeah, they're a good team, and they can beat just about anybody. I mean, they beat UConn, for crying out loud. But at the same time, they're the kind of team that can pretty much lose to anybody as well. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put them on fraud watch along with UCLA and Notre Dame, like we did in an earlier broadcast. Another game in the early window of yesterday's slate that I had my eye on was North Carolina and Boston College. North Carolina ended up getting the win 78-71. And I thought UNC was going to be in a little bit of trouble here because Boston College led the game 63-54 in the fourth quarter. But UNC found a way and they prevailed against Boston College, and they take on Florida State later this morning in about an hour at 11 a.m. on ESPN2. And with a win there, UNC may very well be a top 4 seed, and they may get to host a couple of tournament games. So that's going to be an interesting spot there. And some big news coming out of the SEC as well, as Auburn women's coach Johnny Harris has been fired after 4 seasons, had a 58-63 record with the team, only 1 NCAA tournament appearance. She made a women's NIT second round and a first 4 last year, and they went 13-3 in the SEC this season. And Auburn, coming off of that loss on Wednesday, dang near got my days mixed up, against Georgia 60-50. Now, I really don't know much about Johnny Harris because I really haven't paid a whole lot of attention to Auburn women's basketball, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know just about everything that's going on in that situation there, but it made some pretty big news, so I figure I cover that here as we get going. And also yesterday, the Big East women, they revealed their player honors, and UConn, no surprises, pretty much got all but the defensive player of the year. That went to Lachey Dwyer from St. John's, but nevertheless, Paige Becker's got player of the year as far as the Big East is concerned. Sarah Strong, freshman of the year for the Big East. The 15th player in UConn history to do that. That's a pretty good thing there. Ashlyn Shade, 6th player of the year, and then Gino Auriemma, no surprise, coach of the year there. All right, some other results from yesterday's slate of games. K-State made quick work of UCF. Oklahoma took care of Georgia. Indiana got a big win against Oregon. Texas Tech took out Virginia Tech. Michigan took care of Washington, and Colorado had a close win against Arizona. And then you had the evening window from yesterday, and Cal destroyed Virginia in the ACC tournament game, 75-58. Ole Miss defeated Mississippi State, 85-73. Nebraska with an upset of Illinois, 74-70. And then Louisville survived a scare against Clemson, and they had to have overtime to beat them, 70-68. And then Iowa State took down Arizona State, 96-88. And the story of that, Addie Brown from Iowa State had 41 points, so that's a good job there. And then we had a few more big upsets. Florida upset Alabama, 63-61, and then Iowa upset Michigan State. And Iowa, that is their 11th straight Big Ten tournament win and their 10th win in the last 12 games. And this Iowa team, man, this Iowa team is hot, and we might have to watch them because I think now for sure they're going to be in the NCAA tournament, but I think this is a team that could really do some damage here. So Iowa is definitely a program we're going to have to pay attention to as we get close to this NCAA tournament. And then Texas Tech upset Utah 75-64. In the Big 12. And another game that I had my eye on, this is not a big Power 4 tournament game, but Norfolk State, who I've been outspoken and I've covered very closely when I was an intern at Wavy TV. Norfolk State took down Howard in D.C., going 14-0, undefeated in the MEAC and winning the regular season title. And Diamond Johnson had another masterpiece in the game, and I've been seeing some dialogue of her maybe taken in the second or the third, late second or in the third round of the WNBA, and probably some GMs maybe needing to pay attention to that. So that was another game that I saw there, so that's a pretty good job there. All right, so later today, we have a women's basketball cornucopia. I mean, if you are a fan of women's basketball, today is the best day of your freaking life. We're in the quarterfinals, like I just mentioned at the top of the broadcast. We've got quarterfinals, 4 good games in the ACC, 4 good games in the SEC, 4 good games in the Big 10, 4 good games in the Big 12, and on top of that, we got unrivaled basketball later on tonight. We've got the with the Laces and the Phantom, with the Laces trying to clinch a playoff spot, and Phantom trying to avoid elimination, and then you got Rose and Lunar Owls at 8 o'clock, with that being a potential championship game preview. And we came on here earlier this week talking about Chelsea Gray and Nafisa Collier being the 2 MVP candidates facing off against each other. So it's going to be a very interesting time, but Unrivaled may have to take a back seat to all of this college basketball. So starting with the ACC, we have North Carolina taking on Florida State. That game is a 11 a.m. tip-off on ESPN2, as we just mentioned. The last time they met was January 26th, and Florida State won that game 86-84, and that was the game where Tania Latson of Florida State hit that buzzer beater shot to win the game. And then at 1:30, you got Georgia Tech and NC State. That game's actually on ACC Network. And their last meeting was on February 20th. And NC State won that game 83-68. And Isaiah James and Zoe Brooks each had 17 in that one. And then for the evening window in the ACC, you got Cal taking on Notre Dame at 5 o'clock. That game's on ESPN2. They last met on February the 9th, and Notre Dame won that game 91-52, destroyed them. And Hannah Hidalgo had 24 points in the game. And then in the 7:30 hole, you got Louisville and Duke. And that game's on ACC Network, and they last met on February 20th. When Louisville won the game 70-62, and Jada Curry from Louisville scored a season-high 24 points. Now going to the SEC, as mentioned earlier, we got Vanderbilt taking on South Carolina. That's a noon tip-off on ESPN. Their last meeting was on February 23rd, where South Carolina destroyed them 82-54, and Malaysia Fawiley scored 24 in that game. And then at the 2:30 spot, also an ESPN game, you got Oklahoma and Kentucky, who last met on February 4th, and Kentucky won that game 95-86, and Georgia Amore had a career high of 43 points in that game. And then at 6 p.m. on SEC Network, you got Ole Miss taking on the number 1 ranked team in the AP poll, Texas. And Texas won that game 61-58 on January 26th when they last met. And Madison Booker hit that jumper with 13 seconds left in that game. And Ole Miss had an 8-point lead in the last 5 minutes. And then, of course, Texas overcame that. And then for the nightcap in the SEC, you got Florida, who is kind of gaining some steam here. They're taking on LSU. And they last met on January 13th, where LSU won 80-63, and Michaela Williams had 22 points. Now, LSU, they're looking to get back in their winning ways here. They lost 3 of their last 5 games in a 2-game losing streak, and there's probably still some chippiness since Anissa Morrow was snubbed SEC Player of the Year. So LSU, you would have to think, is going to come out firing in that game. All right, Big Ten. Noon tip-off, Indiana taking on USC. Indiana with a big win yesterday. Their last meeting was on January 19th, and USC won that matchup 73-66. And then at 2:30, all of these Big Ten matchups are on Big Ten Network. Michigan is going to be taking on Maryland at 2:30, and Maryland won that game 85-77 when they last faced off on February 17th. And then you've got Nebraska taking on UCLA at 6:30, and their last meeting was on December 29th. UCLA won that game 91-54, and that was their and that was UCLA's first home game against a Big Ten opponent since joining the conference there. And then you've got at 9 o'clock, Iowa, who I mentioned was extremely hot, taking on a very good Ohio State team. They last met on February 17th, and Ohio State won that game in overtime, 86-78, and Jelani Cambridge and Cotty McMahon combined for 54 points in that game. And then, of course, in the Big 12, you've got, starting at noon, you've got Kansas State taking on West Virginia. They last met on February 17th, and West Virginia won that game 70-57. And then at 2:30, both of these games are on ESPNU as far as the Big 12 is concerned. You've got Colorado taking on TCU. They last met on New Year's Day, and TCU won that game 63-50. And then at 6:30 p.m., you got Iowa State taking on Baylor. Their last meeting was on February 22nd, and Baylor won that game 67-52. And then to close it all out on ESPN+, you got Texas Tech taking on Oklahoma State. Their last meeting was on January 25th, where Oklahoma State won that game 71-68, and Staley Hurd scored 34 points in the game for Oklahoma State. So as I mentioned at the top of the program, if you are a fan of women's college basketball, this is going to be the day of your life. I mean, I know I'm going to be locked and loaded on a lot of these games. I'm going to be focused on a lot of them. So it's a very good day for women's basketball, and I'll try to squeeze in as much unrivaled as I can, but I cannot guarantee that I will be fully into it tonight, as we got all of these women's college basketball games coming up, especially if things get close. But we'll try to keep an eye on all of that for you and give you a proper breakdown once those games conclude. Well, my friends, that will do it for the women's basketball rundown. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at CW Talk Sports. That's CWTALKS Sports. And on Bluesky, follow me there. That's also CWTALKS Sports. And I will see y'all the next time. Enjoy the games, everyone. Peace.